One regret is that I was the Indian Express correspondent in the Northeast between 1981 to 83. I was based in Shillong because Shillong was then like the capital of the Northeast. So I was based in Shillong and I traveled all over the Northeast. But I traveled almost nowhere in Meghalaya. And even in Meghalaya, except going as a tourist to Cherrapunji or a couple of other places, and also in Meghalaya, never came to Garo Hills and never came to Tura. And what was the reason? The reason was, one, there was no trouble in Meghalaya, because there was trouble in Nagaland, there was trouble in Mizoram, there was trouble in Tripura, there was trouble in Assam at that point, big trouble. Assam had the big movement on, oil was blockaded. There was always something interesting going on in Arunachal, because Arunachal was a work in progress as a unit of the federation. But Meghalaya was so calm. It was much too calm for a journalist. So I was very happy to be in Shillong, didn't travel. And so this is a box I had to check on my CV, that I've been to Garo Hills and Tura. But that's a minor thing. The more important thing is the affection for Purno Sangma and his family. So as I mentioned to you, if I came to work in the Northeast at Shillong in 1981, Purno Sangma was a very young man. He was a very young man. Captain Williamson Sangma was then the giant of Garo leaders. It was the Williamson Sangma, Bibi Lingdo, that era. I mean, if you want to connect with that era, I think at that point in 1981, James was about 5, Conrad was about 3, and Agatha, you were just over 1 year old. So just about exactly 1.5 years after you were born, our first child was born in Shillong, our daughter. So she was born in Shillong. So it was that far back. There is also a bunch of other regrets. And one of which is that Purno Sangma, one, he left too early. He left too early. He'd be 76 now, which means really left early. He had a lot left to do, because India has 8% of India is tribal, which means India has by far the largest tribal community in the world. 8% means nearly 11 crore, 10 crore tribals. But tribals, by their very definition, because each tribe is distinctive, there are many tribes. There are many tribes. There are tribes in the Northeast. There are tribes in larger tribal population in East Central India, that is Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, and then there are tribal communities in other parts of the country. We've never really had national tribal leaders, because usually tribal leaders end up being leaders of their own tribes. They don't become leaders of the tribal community, speaking for the tribal cause, tribal point of view across the country. There have been very few like that. And Purno Sangma had risen to that stature, and he was rising in that stature. I thought, given the fact that he was very young, I thought, oh, finally India has a pan-national tribal leader. And he's a pan-national tribal leader who will also find a following among tribals of East Central India. That is where right now you have a lot of dissatisfaction, economic distress. There is economic distress everywhere, but East Central India in particular, that's where you have Naxalism. But tribal, and they have tribal leaders there, but a national level tribal leader is still lacking. And that is the gap that Purno Sangma left behind. Had he been around, this is no age. I mean, next year in America, if Trump wins his nomination, which he likely will, 2 80-year-olds will be fighting to be presidents of America. So age, the definition of age has now been changed. So Purno Sangma would have been a very active, very powerful, mainstream pan-national politician. Because none of us saw him as a leader from the Northeast or as a leader of one tribe, leader of Garos of the Northeast. And I believe, and I do believe, I have good reasons to believe that even in Meghalaya, other tribes, Khasis, Jaintias, they did not see him only as a Garo leader. To that extent, his passing away was also a loss to India, India's tribal community, but also to India. Second regret is a two-in-one, that Purno Sangma did not become President of India. Because at a time when he contested, it is tragic that everybody didn't agree on him getting the presidency. And one of the reasons that did not happen was the internal politics then of Congress party, because Mr. Pranab Mukherjee had his own issues with his party high command. I think he would have wanted to be Prime Minister several times in the past, including in 1984. It didn't happen many times, so he really wanted to be president now. And he was a preeminent figure in the Congress party. I will not go into that. I would have wished if Congress party had agreed also in 2012 to unanimously accept Purno Sangma as India's president. I said it's a two-in-one regret because if he had become president, he would have become India's first tribal president. So we welcome the fact that India has its first tribal president now, in Draupadi Murmu, president. So that's a very good thing. But this is something that could have happened much earlier. And so that's a second regret. And third regret is that when I worked, that's a personal regret, when I worked in the Northeast between 1981 to 83, I never got to know Purno very much because Purno was a much younger politician. At that point, I told you that B.B. Lyngdoh and Captain Sangma were dominant. Meghalaya politics was reasonably stable and Meghalaya had no trouble. So my interaction with the political class in Meghalaya was very limited, and it's unfortunate that I didn't get to know Purno then, but in Delhi he more than made up for it because anybody who touched went back with that touch because his touch of affection and warmth endured. So to that extent, he was the Northeast India's, especially the tribal Northeast India's finest ambassador in New Delhi. There's never been one before him there's never been one like that before him, and until now, there hasn't been one after him. I know Agatha's there. Agatha, you have big shoes to fill. So I wish you well, and I wish your brothers well, and ma'am, Swaradini ji, you should be very proud of them. I'd say in the last 30-35 years, he was the only speaker who was genuinely independent because of the power of his own personality. Because he combined charm with some of these tactics, management tactics, and also his own stature to raise the position to a certain level. Because speaker in our democracy provides stability. We undermine that position, but speaker provides stability to our politics. And once speaker goes and sits in the house, then has to be unmindful of who has what numbers in the house. So, say post 1984, if BJP had only 2 MPs in the house, then the speaker should have been unmindful of those 2. But see what kind of JPC that parliament ran in Beaufort. That JPC under Shankaranan was a sham. The speaker has a big role in these areas, and Purno had really raised the stature of the speaker's chair, which is one more reason that I think he really needed to become the president of India, because if he did, he would have also raised the stature of the position of the president of India.